In my last video regarding New Testament reliability, I spoke on two subjects within the same video, that being authorship and dating. In this video, I intend to follow a similar pattern in discussing both external and internal evidence regarding the New Testament's reliability. Now, although I am discussing both subjects, the amount of time devoted towards external sources will be greater than that of internal evidence. This is largely because I find it more useful, and I am more familiar with external evidence anyways. Now, when it comes to historical inquiry, the more sources we have for a person, place, or event, the better. So, what do we have for the New Testament? Well, there's quite a lot, but for the purposes of this video, I will separate them into three categories, those being people, places, and events. Now, when it comes to people, places, and events of the New Testament, we could find various early Christian writings that make mention of the New Testament accounts. But the skeptic may say that these Christian writings were by Christian authors after the composition of the New Testament, therefore cannot be counted as independent because they likely received a lot of their information from the New Testament. Now, although it could be debated how much the writings of early Christians such as Clement, Polycarp, and Papias relied on the New Testament, we will not do that here. We can disregard all early Christian literature and still observe a vast array of non-Christian writings that attest to the New Testament. Keep in mind as we look that this evidence is from those who aren't particularly interested in proving Christianity, and in some cases would be from people who we would expect to want to disprove the events, people, or places mentioned within the Bible. Now, starting with people, the obvious one is Jesus. I briefly mentioned the passages of Josephus and Tacitus in my resurrection video, and both of these attest to his existence, with Josephus in particular having two accounts on Jesus. Now, if you saw my resurrection video, then you'll know that one of these passages in Josephus is regarded as a late interpolation by most scholars, and this is accurate. The passage in question has Josephus, who is a devout Jew, claiming Jesus was the Messiah and rose from the dead. This is very obviously not something Josephus believed or said, and it's rightly argued to be unoriginal. But that doesn't mean the entire passage is just pure fiction, as not even the most skeptical atheistic scholars would go to that extreme. There is an Arabic manuscript of Josephus, which, instead of saying Josephus believed these things, says that Jesus' followers claimed that he had appeared to them and was the Messiah. So, even though there was some foul play on part of a Christian scribe or scribes, the passage no doubt attests to the existence of Jesus. But what did Tacitus have to say? Well, in his work The Annals, Book 15, Tacitus writes, Nero fastened his guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, from whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procurators, Pontius Pilate. So we have two first-century, non-Christian sources attesting to the existence of Jesus. Now, although we are specifically looking for just the person of Jesus in this section of the video, and not events that have to do with him, these two sources mention the general outline of the New Testament story, that being Jesus' life, ministry, death, and influence after his death. In total, we have 9 non-Christian sources about Jesus, up to 150 years after his death. Now, on the surface, that may not seem like a lot, but by ancient standards, it's very rare to have that many. The Emperor Tiberius, who is a contemporary of Jesus, has just as many sources, that being 9, up to 150 years after his death. Now, although this video is interested primarily in non-Christian sources, if we throw the Christian sources back into the mix, then the Jesus to Tiberio ratio goes from 9 to 9 to 42 to 10. But Jesus isn't the only figure that is mentioned outside of the New Testament. Josephus, in Book 18 of Antiquities of the Jews, mentions John the Baptist, as well as his ministry and subsequent execution by Herod. Now, if you saw part 1 of my resurrection video, then you'll know there is another follower of Jesus that Josephus reports the death of, that being James, Jesus' brother, who was slain by Ananus, the Jewish high priest. But these aren't the only two New Testament figures who had a role in an execution that was mentioned outside of the New Testament. The man who sentenced Jesus to death, Pontius Pilate, is also mentioned in various ancient writings. Furthermore, in 1961, there was a limestone block discovered which contained an inscription saying, Pontius Pilate, prefect of Judea. Now, although it was Pilate who officially allowed Jesus' crucifixion, one of the main culprits who seeked the demise of Jesus was Caiaphas, and like Pilate, we have archaeological evidence for Caiaphas in the form of the Caiaphas family tomb. Speaking of tombs, the tomb of the Apostle Philip may have also been found in Hierapolis. Now, for those who don't know, Jewish burial practices included the burial of the body, and then, at a later time, the placing of the bones of a person within a burial box called an ossuary. Interestingly enough, we have an ossuary with an inscription that reads, James, son of Joseph, brother of Jesus. In the ancient world, you typically wouldn't mention their brother unless they were really important, which in this case would explain why Jesus is mentioned. Furthermore, it is estimated that less than 2% of the people at the time would have been named James and had a father named Joseph and a brother named Jesus. Now, in terms of the ossuary itself, it dates around to the 1st century, and its lettering is consistent with 1st century Aramaic and wasn't made with modern tools. But there's another ossuary inscription that is of interest, one that reads, Alexander, son of Simon. Interestingly enough, the inscription found on the ossuary may contain a misspelling of Cyrene. On top of that, many of the names found on the ossuaries that Alexander's was stored with were common in Cyrene at the time. So, given our information, this very well may be the Alexander, son of Simon of Cyrene, mentioned in Mark 15:21. Well, that concludes our section on New Testament figures found in external sources, and although there's a lot of detail that could go into each person, for the sake of time and simplicity, I will now talk about places mentioned in the New Testament that can be identified through external sources. Now, the first thing I will note is that archaeological evidence for various small towns within the Bible, such as Nazareth, Bethlehem, and Capernaum, has been found. Now, speaking of Capernaum, the synagogue in Capernaum, which is mentioned in Luke's Gospel, was, for many years, used to attack the reliability of the New Testament because there wasn't any evidence that it even existed. That was until archaeological evidence was produced showing Luke's accuracy when it comes to the synagogue, as multiple buildings that fit the description of a synagogue have been found in Capernaum. But the Capernaum synagogue isn't the only specific location within a town that has been rediscovered through archaeology. The pool at Bethesda, where Jesus heals a lame man, has also been found. Perhaps the most famous location that may have been discovered through archaeology is the location of the trial of Jesus. Dr. Simon Gibson says that although there are no inscriptions stating that it happened at this location, everything within the archaeological, historical, and even gospel record suggests that the location has been found here. But what about events mentioned in the New Testament? Well, unsurprisingly, not many pagan Roman historians wrote down the claims of peasant Jews in their works of history, but there are definitely exceptions, and that is what we will be looking at. Now, although many ancient writings have been lost, fragments have been preserved through other works. One such example is seen in Julius Africanus's Chronography. In this work, Julius says that two Roman historians, Thallus and Phlegon, mentioned the darkness that would have occurred during Jesus' crucifixion. Thallus explains the darkness as an eclipse of the sun, and Phlegon, in his own words, says, during the time of Tiberius Caesar, an eclipse of the sun occurred during the full moon. But there was another event that happened during the crucifixion of Jesus, that being an earthquake. Well, scientists now have confirmation that a large earthquake did indeed happen in Judea, somewhere between 26 and 36 AD, and it was during the reign of Pontius Pilate. But what about internal evidence in conjunction with external evidence? Well, there are more than just a few internal indicators within the text to suggest the reliability of the text itself, but I am specifically going to present internal evidence in the form of the text's consistency with secular or non-Christian history. If you want to see other forms of internal evidence, I would suggest watching Inspiring Philosophy's video on the subject, or Testify's many videos regarding things such as undesigned coincidences, unexplained illusions, artless similarities, and so on and so forth. But getting back to what I am going to speak on, what are some of these internal indicators that I'm talking about? Well, to speak broadly, the Book of Acts in particular seems to have a lot of reliable, non-Christian information. Dr. Colin Himmer has pointed out that Acts gets over 80 historical facts correct, including local industries for specific regions, proper names of ports, proper lines of boundary, slang terminology, specific landmark, and local variations in languages, and proper titles for regional and local officials. Now, keep in mind that the Book of Acts has its characters traveling quite a lot, especially the case with Paul. So, in a work like this, it would be very easy to show quite a lot of ignorance when it comes to speaking on foreign places that are far from your own home, especially without the assistance of modern technology such as Google. Yet, Luke's track record is pretty good. almost as if he was a companion of Paul. Now, looking at things in a less broad perspective, there are quite a few indicators that I have actually already mentioned. If you've seen my previous video on authorship and dating, then you'll know that the Gospels are pretty spot on when it comes to geography, naming customs, titles, and rulers. This is especially true when we compare New Testament writings to later pseudepigraphal writings that were written much later. One such example we can observe outside of Christian literature is the work of Philostratus, who, writing around 200, attempts to make up a story about a first-century sage named Apollonius. Now, unfortunately for Philostratus, he failed very badly. There are dozens of errors that indicate the work is a late forgery. One of the most apparent is having Apollonius speak to Babylonian kings, despite the fact that Babylon was in utter ruins by the time of the 1st century. Now, that is what we would find with unreliable, late, anonymous histories. Yet, the Gospel's internal evidence don't show these features, not in the slightest. Now, I tried to save the best for last when demonstrating the reliability of the New Testament from internal features. So, time for a quick history lesson. Herod the Great ruled a united kingdom. Later on, after his death, this kingdom was divided between his 3 sons, Antipas, Archelaus, and Philip. Antipas inherited Galilee, Archelaus inherited Judea, and Philip inherited the areas east and north of the Sea of Galilee. Archelaus was later removed from his position, and Judea became a Roman province that was ruled by prefects. Pilate was the 5th prefect and ruled from 26 to 36 AD. Then Judea was ruled by others until Antipas became the ruler. Antipas died and was replaced by a system of procurators. All the while, Agrippa II is given limited power in part of Judea. This political mess could cause a very reliable and accurate writer to slip up quite easily, yet the Gospels walk through this political hellhole unfazed. No pun intended. With that being said, thank you for watching this video. If you liked the video, then leave a like. If you have any thoughts or comments that you wanted to share, then put them in the comments. And if you want to see more videos like this, then press the subscribe button. With that being said, thank you for watching.